Y'all want to know why men are not vulnerable to women? I'm going to tell you why. It is because, first of all, nobody gives a shit about a man's emotions.
Women want a to show emotion. Y'all don't allow him to do that.
Because he stepped up to the mic and overgeneralized.
Some women looking at you lesser if there's tears on your cheek, but if there's tears tattooed, that same girl is a freak.
This is why you should stop telling your girl your problems when you get into relationships.
As a man, nobody really fucking cares what you're going through.
We're men, so we take things literal. So when somebody says happy wife, happy life, in our head, how we hear that is what she says matters. And just move your feelings to the side.
I think women, we get so frustrated. We're like, they don't feel anything. Like, how do you not give a fuck? Like, we're fighting. Like, we're trying to get a rise out of them. But they do, and they actually might deeper than we do. Because we're expressing it. We're releasing it.
We get so fucking frustrated, but it's like, little do we know, they're like, have this superpower to be able to look like they're good, but on the inside be crumbling.
Bitch, what I was trying to say is this situation got me so wet and so dry at the same time. Exactly.
What's up, bitches? Welcome back to another episode of So Wet, So Dry. I'm one of your hosts, Fiji, like the island, like the water. I'm not a men's apologist, but if we're going to continue to date them and fuck them, then we need to address their feelings. And I work in social media and marketing.
And I am your other host, Autumn. Like the season, I feel like 99% of my female friendships were made by me trying to flirt with them first, and I work in entertainment. If you guys are tuning in for the very first time, what we do on So Wet, So Dry is we explore duality through deep diving topics about sex, relationships, personal identity, all where internet trends and reality collide. We do post polls for every single episode that we do and give an opportunity to submit a story or a question or something. We do it on our Instagram at So Wet So Dry. The O's are zeros. So if you want to be a part of that, you've got to follow us over there. And we would love to have you join our community of confused pussies.
Yes, and today we are talking about the fact that men do in fact have feelings, but do we as women really give a fuck? We're going to get into all that, but before we do, we're going to start the episode as we always do, talking about what we're so wet and so dry about in this very moment. So I will go first. I'm so wet, honestly, about the Emerson students and all the students across college campuses that are fighting for Palestinian rights and against funding all of the destruction that's happening in Gaza. Both Autumn and I went to Emerson, and like it was so crazy to see all of that on the news. Like honestly, I'm mostly dry about everything that's happening.
Right.
But I'm really wet to see like just like the like fire like among these students like of not giving up, because like it is traumatic like what a lot of them went through. Like they're putting their education on the line. A lot of them like maybe might get like suspended, like all of those things. But I just want to say, like, we stand in solidarity with them, and, like, we see you, and we see you fighting, so.
Yeah. I know, it was really surreal to see the protests, like, right in that alleyway where we used to always be. Like, it was crazy, and it's like, we definitely would have, been out there with them if we were there. And I know, it's really intense, but definitely wet about the good part of it, that people are using their voice and trying.
They're getting good press. Like, they're actually, like, getting press on the topic. I mean, the narrative isn't always, like, correct about what's actually going on.
Right.
But at the end of the day, like, I feel like college kids do have a really big voice in this country, so, like, it's good that they're doing that.
Yeah, totally. I am so wet about this book, guys. I just finished reading it a little while ago. It's called Reincarnation and Karma by John Van Aken. And he also did another book called Karma to Grace, which I want to read too. But it's basically about the afterlife. If you guys are watching video, here's the book. And it's about the afterlife and like what I believe. Like it's a lot about like soul traveling after you die, and like kind of like when after you die you like reassess your life with your spirit guides, and it's like there's certain things that we're all working on as people. Like there's all like a reason that we were here in this specific century, like in this specific timeline. And it's a lot about soul family. Like if there are people that you specifically were like, I want this person to be my sister in this life and this person to be my teacher.
Us.
Or like us, bitch, like friends. Exactly. So I super wet about it. It's a great book. It's a really easy read. Like it's nothing crazy. But it really spoke to me. So you guys should check it out if you're interested.
Yes, they'll plug it in the description. I'm so dry. Okay, if you guys have been like loyally listening, you know that I was obsessed with Baby Reindeer, and there's been developments. Like we kind of talked about in the Are We Dating the Same Guy Facebook group, like doxing and everything like that. And Richard Gadd asked specifically that we don't try to find Martha, who was like the character, the stalker in the show.
Right.
And of course, they found her. Her real name's Fiona. That's all I know. And she went on Piers Morgan. Which, first of all, Piers Morgan is his own problematic-ass situation, but now, like, she might be, like, suing him for defamation, allegedly. And I say that I'm not going to link any of that interview. Like, I refuse to watch it. Like, I've seen it pop up on my TikTok, so that's how I know about it. But it's just, like, why are we platforming, like, abusers? And it's just, like, so crazy to me for, like, Piers Morgan to, like, platform her. And it's, like, sad. Like, it's violence against men, like, sexual violence against men, and abuse against men. Like, if it was reversed, I don't think we'd be platforming. I mean, we have, like, Harvey Weinstein and shit like that. But still, it's just, like, can we respect, like, people should be able to make art about their trauma and, like, be able to change the details, I think, without like the other person suing them for defamation and like giving them a platform and like I don't know. It makes me sick, the entire thing. So
yeah, and it sucks that he like put his whole life out there and like gave everyone this like amazing piece of art that was like so traumatic for him and healing and probably a lot of other stuff. And like asked people specifically not to do one thing, and then they did it.
And then of course they do.
Yeah, and it's a trend. Like a lot of podcasts, not just podcasts, like a lot of creators like platform abusers, like people that are because they want clicks or they want, you know, it's like trauma clickbait.
Yeah.
So it's like a pattern, and it's super dry.
Yeah, and one other thing I just want to say about the whole Baby Reindeer shit, because I've been so obsessed, is like a lot of people were also like coming at him for like ways in which he could have been problematic in certain instances, which I just found like kind of frustrating, because the whole point of the show was to show that like the journey of a victim is not like, they're not this like all awful holy person that never did anything wrong. Like they do things wrong.
Right.
So like, I don't know, like they're kind of going after Richard like for all these things. And I just wonder like what it like, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting to see it play out because he is a man, and like obviously they do that to women when they go through sexual abuse and all of that too. But like the whole thing, I'm just like, leave the man alone, please.
Right. But it's abuse. It's abuse. Like, you know, like abuse is what I meant to say. And it's like, that's obviously something that like, you know, you take on a little bit more because you've been through it. So it's like, I get it, dude. It's rough. And the whole thing that he's a man, it's like, that's kind of what this episode is like a little bit about.
Yeah.
So, I would say I'm just so dry, like, because, I'm wet about, I'm going to San Diego with my friend like next month for like 2 nights or whatever. But I'm dry because, like, of course, I texted my ex that now lives in San Diego. Now, it's like, why do I have to do that? Like, I just, like, text her and was like, hey, like, I'm going to San Diego. And she's like, oh, why? I'm like, oh, my friend, blah, blah, blah. She's like, when are you going to be
which
here?
ex?
The basketball football player.
Oh, I thought you meant the guy. I was like,
oh,
whoa.
No.
Okay, that's okay. I'm like, that's fine.
No, yeah, the one from a long time ago. But, you know, I'm always just trying to, like, fucking rock the boat, bitch. But she was like, when are you going to be here? And then I just got busy with work. So I think, like, when I get there, like, maybe I'll just, like, send a cute selfie and be like, hey.
I'm screaming.
Like,
I mean,
whatever. Just fucking
run it back. You know, you never fucking know.
Yeah.
But all right, guys. So as I said before, we're talking about the fact that men do, in fact, have feelings. But a lot of us women are kind of fed up with those feelings. We don't always hold space for men to express these feelings. And I think when we talk about that, we also get really defensive about it. But there's a lot trending like on TikTok, in the media, and songs and stuff that's like men should be building houses, like men, you know, not men shouldn't cry, but like toughen up, like all of that kind of stuff. So I think it's time that we really address this, because the men are in a bit of a crisis. So before we get into everything, I just want to play these 2 TikToks back to back.
Y'all want to know why men are not vulnerable to women? I'm going to tell you why. It is because, first of all, nobody gives a shit about a man's emotions. That's first of all. A lot of women don't give a fuck about a man's emotions. So when you get into a relationship with a man, I'm not saying all women, but most women in this day and age, when they get into a relationship with a man and they want him to be vulnerable, show emotion, the minute he gets vulnerable and he tells you what hurts him, what makes him sad, all this shit, y'all be using that shit against him. So why the fuck would a man do that? Why would he get into the next relationship and be vulnerable? For what? For y'all to use that shit against him? Because the last thing on your mind is your man's mental health, which is insane. Because that's your partner. You're supposed to love them and be there for them. And y'all don't be doing that. It's always me. Oh, I'm depressed. I'm this, I'm that, I'm that. What about him? What about him? Then on top of that, y'all call that shit weak. Like, at the end of the day, he's a human being. He's your partner. Be considerate.
Some women looking at you lesser if there's tears on your cheek, but if there's tears tattooed, that same girl is a freak. Ooh. So they're attracted to the pain unless they hear the pain speak. So it's like, it's really interesting because when you talk to women, thank you. But it's like when you talk to women and you like kind of see where their head's at, you see that they kind of like, a lot of women want this sort of rough and rugged guy who's like, he's tough and all these things, but like you don't want him to talk about it because now he's soft. But it's like, so you want him to have some pain because that's what makes him the rough and rugged, but you just don't want to hear about it. And so where does he go then? And so you just want him to be quiet, but then you're wondering why he can't open up to you. Oh, well, he just doesn't open up to me. Which one is it? This isn't Build-A-Bear.
First of all, I think a lot of us really need to like hear this. And I think it really, like, we've dehumanized men, like, as a society. We've been mad that men have dehumanized women and all that's gone down. But in turn, we really have dehumanized them. It's like we just want them for how they look and, like, what their story is and what they can provide. But exactly, like, none of us care about men's mental health. It's almost weird to say men's mental health because we so much are just, like we just haven't gave a fuck, like subconsciously or consciously, like we really haven't cared. And what Russ said about like, we want a man that has pain. Like we want a man that's been through stuff and is like rugged and like all of that bad boy-esque. But it's like, we don't give them the space to talk about it. So where do they go? Where do they go? I don't know where they go. They don't talk about it with anyone.
No, that one definitely hit me because I'm like, I definitely love like a quiet man, like a bad boy, like someone with trauma eyes. Like I am number one, love that shit. But like at the same time, I have like felt myself be like, I don't want to hear when they get sad or like emotional, like it's too much. And like even the first girl, like her TikTok, like I was looking for TikToks like this when I was on TikTok. But I think if it had shown up in my feed without me thinking of this topic, I would have been like put off by it. I would have been like, oh, she's like a pick me, like, yeah, men's feelings, like whatever. Like all of us kind of have this like this little scar on our heart where we're like, oh, but like, like, because we've put men before us sometimes, or we think that we do. Yeah. Because that's what we're going to get into in this episode. Like, I think women's perception of things is a little bit different than our actual actions all the time. Yes. Because I don't think we understand men as well as we think we do.
Yeah. And I don't think we're able to like that ingrained like patriarchy like also affects the way we see men rather than just patriarchy affecting how they make our lives miserable. It's like it does also affect that, which is like interesting. And I feel like I definitely wasn't hip to that like a year ago.
Yeah, exactly. So we kind of got the idea for this episode coming off of our male loneliness episode and also like emotionally unavailable men to sprinkle pipeline. So like recommend those episodes too if you guys haven't listened to them.
Yeah.
And we're going to use some quotes that we've used in both of those episodes, I think, because they just still apply and that's how we got the idea. So I want to bring in our girl Bell Hooks. This is from her book, Men, Masculinity, and Love. And she says, often men, to speak the pain, first turn to the women in their lives and are refused a hearing. In many ways, women have bought into the patriarchal masculine mystique. Asked to witness a male expressing feelings, to listen to those feelings and respond, they simply turn away. There was a time when I would often ask the man in my life to tell me his feelings, and yet when he began to speak, I would either interrupt or silence him by crying, sending him the message that his feelings were too heavy for anyone to bear, so it was best if he kept them to himself. Women are fearful of hearing men voice feelings. I did not want to hear the pain of any male partner because hearing it required that I surrender my investment into the patriarchal idea of the male as protector of the wounded. If he was wounded, how could he protect me?
It's so intense. And I remember this specifically from another episode because it really stood out to me. But it's just like, yeah, y'all, like we're not thinking about it like this. Like I feel like we get so wrapped up in like the media and just like what it is to be a bad bitch and like putting men down. It does feel good. Like I'll never tell you that it feels bad. I don't feel bad about it. Like I felt really good about it. It gives you like that power. But like at the end of the day, like our other episode, especially if you're a straight woman, and even if you're not, you still need to treat men like human beings. And like for a long time, I thought it was like, well, I'm a lesbian. I don't really care for I don't really care for male friendships. Like, why does it really matter? But it's like, it does matter because in turn, I'm not like unlearning that part of the patriarchy. Like I'm not bettering myself as a human being. It's not even all about them. It's like we all need to have this knowledge. We're all going to have to interact with men, whether you're a lesbian, like the workplace, just the guy at Starbucks, like they're everywhere. Yeah. And it's like, you know, this silencing him by crying is tough because it's like, I feel like a lot of times I've cried when a man tried to tell me something and it's hard not to. And it's the answer is to not cry. Like, obviously you can't control that. But it's kind of just like maybe being stronger for a second to give him the space to cry too. Because maybe it's like in lesbian relationships, like we both cry. It's fine. But I think men kind of feel like sometimes if a woman's crying, like they definitely can't cry then. Yeah. So it's tough. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're going to get into that a little bit more, like the pressure men feel to be strong in order to like hide their emotions so women can express theirs. And I think, like you said, you can't always control when you cry, but crying can be used as a weapon sometimes, like with white women tears, like when talking about racism and all of that, like we talked about that as well. And it's like, I know I've like, one of the things I try to practice after reading this book was like with the guy that I'm with, like, and we've had hard conversations, I've been like, I might cry, but I want you to know that doesn't mean I'm like falling apart. Like we can still have a conversation. It's just
so
that this might
You've
affect
said
me.
That?
Yeah, because because I've seen him like when I've started crying, like just kind of be like, oh, like, are you okay? Like, and kind of like not shut down, but just be more focused on if I'm okay. But I'm like, no, I still want to have this hard conversation. But yeah, I think the part about like our belief that, oh, if he's soft or wounded, how could he ever protect me? And I think a lot of women are frustrated with like how we have to be in our quote unquote masculine energy, be protectors, whatever. But like this is all like a false idea of patriarchy. Like we need to like stand in our strength too. So
So I feel like it's a very common thing. All women want men to be vulnerable. We want men to open up. But do we really, though? Like, are we showing them that? Are we giving them the space? So we asked you guys, women, do you want men to open up and be vulnerable? 83% of y'all said yes, 3% said no, and 14% said sometimes. And somebody submitted a listener story that said it would keep, trigger warning, suicide down. Yeah, like that's pretty fucking intense of a listener story, honestly.
Right. And that was from a man.
Yeah.
That was from a man.
Okay. And then, so we asked you guys too, women, in your experience with men, how do you generally respond to them being vulnerable? 4% said low-key and ick. 11% said I listen even if it's hard. 4% said, I shut down. I don't want to hear that. And 81% Did I use it as an opportunity for us to grow closer? Y'all are lying. Y'all are actually 100% lying.
Yeah.
Maybe you, and that's what you're getting into. It's like, maybe we see it like that. We think we want that. But, like, do we really have the tools in a patriarchal society to, like, give men, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just like, I feel like for me, the right answer is I listen even if it's hard. Because if you don't acknowledge that, like, men aren't really given the opportunity a lot to be vulnerable, then you're not really going to be able to give them a safe space. Like, you have to acknowledge that. It can't just be like, oh, like, men never open up. They're so, like, rock solid. Like, you can't talk about that and just not talk about how boys are growing up, just like how girls are growing up. Like, it's the same shit, just, like, different experiences. So I think you guys are lying. I think I use it as an opportunity for us to grow closer is a great thing. But as a society, there's no way that that's actually happening with all that's going on.
I think it's like a huge disconnect. Like, I genuinely feel like women think that they're doing that.
Yeah.
Because, like, we're the more emotionally intelligent ones. And I think that I thought that for a long time. Like, it wasn't more until, like, I actually started holding the space to listen
me
to
too.
men.
I don't want to say that I've always been like this.
Yeah.
Like, a year, like, when I was with my past boyfriend, I wasn't. It's with this, like, it's through this podcast that we've been able to kind of just, you have to, like, sit down and think about it and, like, talk to people that you care about and trust. And, like we give each other the space to, like, fuck up sometimes. Like, we're not always perfect and we don't hold that against each other. Like, you got to just deeply think about it. And I don't think I would be doing that if we didn't have a podcast like this, to be honest.
Yeah. And I think it's important for us as women to talk about, because it's like, I think women do get labeled as, like, pick-me's and stuff when they say, oh, but we're not really doing that. But it's like, in the conversations that I've had, like, with men in my life before, like, researching this topic, like, many men in our comment section are saying, like, when I open up to women, like, it's not received well, while they're simultaneously saying we want men to be vulnerable and open up more. So, like, clearly there's a disconnect, and I don't think we need to keep saying, like, oh, like, no, you guys aren't doing it right, like, whatever, oh, we are doing it right. Like, I think we need to do some self-reflection. So I want to play this TikTok because it gets into it a little bit more. So
Women want a to show emotion. Y'all don't allow him to do that.
Because he stepped up to the mic and overgeneralized all the women in the audience and said, why don't y'all allow a man to be emotional? No, there's a lot of women who are actually emotionally attuned. I'm an emotionally intelligent woman, so I would give and lay out a platform for a man to be able to spill all of his problems, voice his concerns, and everything else. There are a lot of women in his audience who are...
Don't use it as ammo, though.
Hold on, wait a minute, baby. I got the mic. Let me speak, because I let you speak. When it comes to women, there's a lot of women in this audience who are emotionally aware, who do provide the safety. And y'all, and too many of you men say that we're just absent when it comes to logic. No, logic is actually in the conversation when we ask ourselves, well, why does he feel this way? Why did he do this? No, it's actually present. Sometimes it's that you're not voicing it in a way that we can receive it. Because sometimes people say, I feel, and after I feel is an attack. So we can't hear what it is that you're actually expressing, because the attack triggers our defense. But that's not every single woman. There are some really good women who are emotionally regulated. You have to find a woman who is regulated so she can be able to provide you that safety that it is that you need. Just like most of you men tell women to pick better men. No, pick a better woman, because there are women who are absolutely arrogant who will do that for you.
So the craziest thing about this TikTok to me was the comment section. And, like, the biggest comment on this TikTok was, she's proving his point. And she is, because, like, do you see how quick, like, he said, you know, like, he's expressing this feeling of, like, when I try to express my vulnerabilities, like, women don't want to receive it. And she's so quick to put it on men and turn it around. And even, like, as she starts going into it, he's like, whoa, but don't use it as ammo, though. Like, he's trying to say, like, I'm not trying to fight. Like, this isn't supposed to be an argument. Like, he's just trying to have a real conversation about it. And I think she's so quick to go into, like, oh, like, you need to pick a better woman, because I think that's something we as women say to each other all the time, like, oh, you need to pick a better man, like, da-da-da, like, we hold ourselves to that. But the other thing is, she was saying, like, sometimes it's the way that you guys say things. You're not saying it in a way that she'll receive it. But, like, when are we going to sit down and say, like, they're not always, like, men don't have the emotional intelligence that we do. They're not socialized in the same way. I think we need to do a little bit of adjustment on how we're able to receive things before we're so quick to turn it around and be like, no, you do this, you do that, you, like, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that was definitely not my reaction to the TikTok. I'm going to be so honest.
Yeah.
But I think it's because, like, there's nothing I love more than to see, like, a woman like,
stand
really,
up,
like, stand up, use her voice, and just be like, shut that bitch down.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm blinded by that. I'm starstruck. Like, I'm like, oh my God.
No,
like, she
and
looks so hot.
I felt that too. I think if I wasn't watching it with this episode in mind, I would have felt differently. But reading the comments, I was like, there were multiple that was like, she's literally proving his point.
Yeah.
Because this was like an open discussion about like male and female relationships.
Because I don't really agree with the part where it's like, you need to find a better woman. Because I think this like rhetoric of like a better man, better woman, like it's not that. Like it's the societal fucking problems.
Right.
You know? And it's like, but at the same time, like to be honest, like to clap back, like I do feel like, yes, men don't know how to like give us criticism or like say something hard in a nice way. Like they do kind of attack it more, and I struggle with the idea of like, oh, well, you know, we just, you know, it's because that's how they're socialized. Like we just need to toughen up then. I'm like, I struggle with that.
And
I'm like, no, they need to be nicer.
Like, we don't know how to interpret it because we're used to them addressing things with us in kind of like a hard, sterner way or whatever. So when they try to be vulnerable, like this guy is trying to do, I feel like our instinct is to fight back too.
Yeah. But to me, like, honestly, to me, like, he was being very non-threatening. His voice is like very quiet. Like, and it's not even about that. Like, I'm talking more about when, like, you're dating a guy in a relationship and they come to you with something, a relationship problem or something that you did that they didn't like, and the way that they are opening up and being vulnerable about it is like kind of mean.
Yeah.
Or do we just think it's mean because they're men and like they have all of this power in the world? Like if a woman said it the exact same way, would I receive that information differently because she's a woman? I don't know.
Well, I think, because, like, when me and you fight, for example, like, I feel like, we haven't always fought the best way, but it's, like, we try to, like, hold space for each other and I feel statements,
now
things
we do
like
great.
That. Yeah, but,
now
like, I don't think the average man, like, has that language or is taught that way to talk.
I feel statement,
Yeah, and I think, like, if we just keep being like, oh, you can't talk to me at all unless you're going to talk to me like this, I don't think that's too much. Then we're silencing them even more. Like there's a happy medium.
Yeah.
And like this situation, like in this platform, like I think we got to be careful because then how are we any better than like the whatever podcast or like Andrew Tate where they have women on and just are there to like argue against them. Yeah. You know, like if we want to invite men into the conversation, I think we have to actually be open to listening to them and not just like projecting on them.
It's just so tough. Like, it really is, because, like, we are in this era of, like, female empowerment. And, like, just at first glance seeing that TikTok, like, I honestly think I'd be like, yeah, she's so right. Like, fuck. But it's
because
just I want to, like,
someone
fuck her.
to throw. Like, I think we have a lot of anger and we've been hurt by so many men that, like, we hear that and we're like, oh, that's not
even
true.
More. So even as a white woman watching that, like, it's just kind of like, it's really hard, dude. Like, and this we know it's hard. Like, we know this whole episode is hard. Like, this is not like something that we've been like feeling our whole lives. Like, this is new. Like, I used to straight up be a man hater. And if y'all go watch the beginning of our podcast journey, it's a lot fucking different. Like, seriously. And that's why it's like, And even like shout out to, you know, people like Khadijah on the internet for like doing this shit that's so hard, and like she or they gets clapped back all the time.
Yeah, because it's nerve-wracking, like, especially being a woman, like, and wanting to build a community of women, talking about, like, sex relationships and identity. I think there's, like, a lot of pressure to, like, not center men and, like, you know, be all women's empowerment. But it's, like, Khadijah put us onto the idea of heteropessimism. And it's, like, guys, like, we can't just blame men for everything if we want to truly love them and be intimate with them. Like, we got to see how the patriarchy hurts them, too. So it's, like...
We have to.
We have to. But so I want to get into a little bit about how men are, in fact, emotional and do have feelings, and back it up with some research. So first we asked you guys the poll. Society doesn't often acknowledge men have feelings too. True or false? And 82% of you guys said true. Only 18% said false. So like you guys do agree that generally, you know, men aren't given the space to show their feelings. And then we had one listener story that said men's fault, but also society has made women do the same. Women are born into families where moms idolize dads who are emotionally detached and tell young men to man up. Men are detached because of the patriarchal system. So they're on to it.
Who was that?
Right. They're fucking, I think this was a man too. They are fucking onto it. So thinking about, like, we tell young boys to, like, man up, all of those things. I want to keep that in our mind as I go through this research real quick. I'm just going to go through 3 sources back to back. So first we have Men Have Feelings Too, this article from a psychologist. And he says, as it turns out, research shows that there are a few differences between how baby boys and girls show emotions. Some studies actually show baby boys are more emotional than girls. In fact, in an examination of more than 150 studies comprising of more than 20,000 children and adolescents, few differences in emotional expression were found between boys and girls during early infancy. Differences grew more pronounced in childhood and adolescence. As you might expect, boys tended to express more anger and aggression, whereas girls expressed more sadness and anxiety. So now I want to bring us back to Bell Hooks. And she says, the first act of violence the patriarchy demands of males is not violence towards women. Instead, patriarchy demands of all males that they engage in acts of psychic self-mutilation, that they kill off the emotional parts of themselves. If an individual is not successful in emotionally crippling himself, he can count on patriarchal men to enact rituals of power that will assault his self-esteem. So this is kind of like men don't cry, man up, you're being a little girl, like you're a wimp, all of that. So it's how they're socialized. It's not how they're born. It's this patriarchy, this psychological patriarchy that's ingrained in them. And then there's this other study that I found from Brian Knox. He is kind of like a relationship coach, and he prioritizes like women's voices. And we're going to come back to him later on. He gives some good advice. But he says he found this study that was pretty much judging like how men and women responded in like bouts of like a argument. Okay. And he says, now the woman got really emotional, raised her voice, red face, anger. The guy, not so much, cool as a cucumber. Almost didn't say a word, and it seemed like he was thinking, who's that alien on the other side of the table that is not making any sense at all? Or it seemed like he was not thinking at all, like a blue screen of emotional death. But the data showed something totally different. His heart rate went up. His sweat glands were very productive. He was freaking out on the inside, but you couldn't see it very well on the outside. And when the emotional argument was over, the woman quickly returned back to her normal state, normal heart rate, and so on. The guy, not so much. He was stressed for much longer, but he didn't talk about it. Of course he didn't. So the number one rule, remember that men have a lower tolerance on any emotional level before they black out and shut down. So this kind of like plays into how we...
that.
Yeah, like I think women, we get so frustrated. We're like, they don't feel anything. Like, how do you not give a fuck? Like, we're fighting. Like, we're trying to get a rise out of them. But they do, and they actually might deeper than we do because we're expressing it, we're releasing it.
It's exactly that. We get so fucking frustrated, but it's like, little do we know, they're like, have this superpower to be able to look like they're good, but on the inside be crumbling. Whereas women, it's always like, you know, if if I don't say anything, my face is going to show it all. Like, I feel like not everyone, but a lot of women, it's like we kind of just like, I can't hold it in personally.
Yeah.
So I'm like, we don't get how they're like that. But it's interesting because of all, and I want to talk about the other stuff you read too, but this one just really stood out to me. But it's like the heart rate, the sweat glands, it's like, that's like science and biology. But I think like the patriarchy, like over time, like they like adapted. It's like adaptation.
It's like a
with
trauma response. Yeah.
And they've learned like how like animals, like when they're scared, like they like camouflage or they like freeze and they like play. It's like they literally have like masked themselves to like, they feel everything on the inside, but like from growing up and just like being a boy, it's like they're just like so good at like never showing that they care. Like,
yeah.
And it's really hard to be in a relationship with someone like that. And that's like the big contrast between like me dating a woman where it's like sometimes it's too much. Like we're talking way too much. Like we need to calm down. We need a happy medium. And with men, it's like nothing. It's like you think they don't give a fuck about you sometimes, but they do. Not all of them, but.
Yeah, and it's because this patriarchy, like, it goes back, like, they're born these, like, sweet little boy babies that feel in all the same ways we do, and they cry and, like, all that stuff. But then the patriarchy just, like, tells them, and by patriarchy is enacted, like, through men, through women, through, like, moms, dads, like, teachers, whatever. So it's, like, you can see how this, like, manifests. And then I think in intimate relationships, like you said, we get so, like, frustrated, and we're letting it out. But it's, like society unfortunately does hold more space for women to be emotional, which we also hate the term because like they'll be like, oh, you're too emotional, which is really frustrating.
Right.
But I don't know, it's weird. It's sad to think about though how like much they're dealing with it like on the inside.
And it's like if we just like take gender out of it, which if we can like remind ourselves that gender is also just a social construct. And it's like when you're in a relationship with someone, it's like, my God, it's like the world is so hard right now, like to just like use your voice and stand up for yourself. It's like, it's our duty as like partners to like be able to give each other that space. And it's like, maybe that's why all these relationships are failing. Maybe that's why men like ghost. Like, I don't know, like maybe it plays a part into it because it's like, they are just like so detached, and it's not like every woman in the world needs to put on their construction hat and go fix it. But it's like us just being like mindful and like doing the small things in our own interpersonal relationships with romantic partners and friends and fucking whoever. Like that's like where change can really be born, you know? Like at the end of the day, it's like it or not, like men are here, like they're not going anywhere. They're not complete, like, scum under the pavement. Like, they're not. Like, they're human beings, guys. Like,
Yeah, and I think it's important, like you said, like, we don't need to put on our fucking Bob the Builder hat and, like, fix every guy. Like, there's some, like, men do need to go to fucking therapy and, like, deal with their own stuff and all of that. But, like, I think the more we, like, remember the way that they're socialized and the way that they're also affected by patriarchy, because at the end of the day, like, the patriarchy is not the man that you have a situationship with, the man that you're dating, your dad, like, whatever. Like, do they reinforce patriarchy? Yes, but they're affected by it just as much as, like, women are in different ways. Yeah. So I think it's just, like, we can use it as a tool and, like, kind of thinking before we speak and act before it's, like, you're blaming them for everything.
Right.
But yeah, I kind of want to get into now, like, the idea that men feel like they need to be strong to protect us and themselves. And, like, in some conversations that I had with men about this topic before, like, researching it and stuff, a lot of men said that they feel like something might bother them, but they just want to, like, you know, not think about it or whatever because they still need to get things done and they still need to show up as, like, a man for their mom, their sister, their girlfriend,
their
like
job,
the guys, like whatever. They still need to function. But meanwhile, you know, all this stuff is going on underneath. So we asked you guys, the men that follow us, in your intimate relationships, do you feel pressure to hide your feelings in order to be strong? And 62% said yes, and 38% said no.
Yikes.
I know.
I mean, I can definitely say, like, because you can argue as women, right? It's like we kind of like, we feel some pressure because we're always seen as like stereotypical criers and emotional people. But for them, it's like, it's not even comparable. Like, it's so much worse. Like, you know, and it's sad. And I don't think, you know, it's not all the woman's fault too. Like, maybe this man really is with like, you know, a woman that's like done a lot of work on herself and like knows that, you know, the patriarchy affects men just as much as it does her. But it's like, you know, it could just be growing up in his environment. Like, there's some mothers that really just put it hard in their sons, like, no crying, like, don't be a fucking pussy ass bitch. And it's really like, oh my God. Like, that's what I've always said. Like, I do not want to be a man. I don't at all. Like, not that they have it so bad, but like, it's kind of rough. I honestly.
It is. And I think it's interesting that you said, like, I forget what exactly you said that made me think of this, but like how women have to feel sometimes like we don't want to show our emotions to be strong. And like, I feel like we're in this time period where women have got like more power in like our careers and education and finances, like all of those things. And we kind of like adopt these like ideas of what we think power looks like, and it comes from men, which is like not showing your emotions and all of those things. So like in us trying to be more powerful, we're following what we see as powerful, which is men. So we're trying to be, you know, but at the same time we're like, oh, men should be vulnerable, like all those things. So like we almost have to reimagine this society that's like beyond anything we've seen before, which is hard.
It's almost like bad bitches are like not cold, but like they're like, they have such a wall up. Like you can't touch them, you can't hurt their feelings. And like even as like a past like stripper, like I used to be like, I have to be so strong, like I can't let these like experiences with men bring me down. Like I have to just feel so above it. But it really is. It's like we're still centering men and doing that by wanting to take on the qualities that like make them quote unquote powerful in our society, which is just like a horrible cycle. Like it's not good.
Yeah. And I think we just started experiencing this more like in the past like 20 years or whatever. And now there's kind of been this like transition into us like wanting more like femininity, like I'm just a girl, like soft girl life, like whatever. Like we want a man to come in and relieve us of this pressure to be quote unquote masculine. But like I think what we're not realizing in all of that is that's like dehumanizing the man too, because it's like he's had to feel like that his whole life. You know, most men have to. And then like the pressure that men feel to protect women, which I kind of want to get into a little bit. So like this article that I found from Psychology Today, titled Why Men Get Uncomfortable When Women Get Emotional, says men work hard to manage women's emotional experience in the service of protecting themselves from discomfort or even danger of their feelings. When a man's partner is upset, that becomes the single preoccupation in his life, as if nothing can happen until the situation is resolved. If mama ain't happy, nobody's happy. This is not a process that men are conscious of. They are just aware of getting increasingly uncomfortable and feeling an urgent need to do whatever they have to do to get it to stop.
And it's like happy wife, happy life.
Yes. And I have a TikTok that says that. So let's play that real quick and then we'll talk about both.
Okay.
We're men, so we take things literal. So when somebody says happy wife, happy life, in our head, how we hear that is what she says matters, and just move your feelings to the side to accommodate for her. So it was things that were happening during the pregnancy to where, like, for example, I felt like she had an attitude towards something and I just ate it. And she could see that something was bothering me. So she's like, yo, like, what's wrong? And I'm just like, you know what? My feelings don't really matter here right now. She was like, that's not true. They do matter. That was the sentence that I needed to hear to understand that, oh, we're in this together. So I think as men, when we hear happy life, happy wife, it's like, yo, just put your feelings to the side. And I'm here to tell men, when your woman is pregnant, you guys are in a journey together. Your feelings do matter. That's
really fucking sweet that she said that to him. Because I can picture myself just being like, no, the fuck they don't. You're right. Go away. Because also, like, pregnancy, like, I'm sorry, but she's on hormones. She's allowed to have an attitude sometimes.
Right.
But just overall, it's like your feelings do matter. And I feel like for him to hear that in that moment, it sounds like something so simple, but it's like actually revolutionary, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's like she's not only a woman but a pregnant woman. So even more so, you would think like, oh, like he just needs to shut the fuck up and go get the ice cream and the whatever she wants. But yeah, I know. I think I've never thought about the happy wife, happy life like that. Yeah. But it really is like, yeah, like just shut the fuck up and like do it. Because if she's mad, then it's going to be a horrible day. Yeah.
But I think it's like the way that we like look at it. And it's kind of like when you think about men, it's kind of cute and adorable that they like prioritize women's feelings, even if a lot of it is selfish in the sense of like they get so worked up internally that like they want you to be good so that like they're not feeling how they feel inside. Like they're prioritizing your emotions, but I don't think they always have like the tools to actually fix it, because I think most women feel so alone in relationships because they feel like they're doing all the emotional labor. Meanwhile, the man feels like he's protecting her by not putting the burden of his emotions on her, when like in this situation, it's like we should be doing this together. Like this is our baby, our life, like.
Right. And it's like there's no way like he can be successful in like taking part in the emotional labor if he doesn't feel like it's a safe space for him to be vulnerable. It's like, you can't have both. Like a lot of women, it's like you just want your man to be vulnerable sometimes. It's like, that's not going to work, you know? And like, it's so much easier for me to say that like as a queer person, because like I don't know, like you do have a different perspective. Like if you've been with like in love with like multiple genders and like able to see that. And like, I definitely saw myself like maybe being a little bit of an ick if like a man cries, just in general. But like thinking about like my ex-boyfriend, like I don't know, maybe in the moment I was like fuck him, but now it's like I would kill to see him cry, you know what I mean? But I think like for straight women it's a lot harder. Like it really is to like be able to kind of just get past this like shit of like wanting men, because men are the protectors because of the patriarchy, but it's like you still want your man to protect you, right?
Right. And I think that's like what's hard is like we're afraid, like Bell Hooks said, of them showing vulnerability, because then we're like, well, then who's going to protect us? But like if we really want to be equal, I feel like we need to like believe in our ability to protect them as well.
And how can someone even be a really good fucking protector when they bottle their fucking emotions? Like one day that man is gonna like tweak the fuck out.
And anger and violence, probably.
And you said it.
Because he doesn't have the tools. And that's why it's like, it's so tricky, because like both frustrations make so much sense. But like, unfortunately, this situation in particular, because women, the way that we're socialized and we are given the space, I think we do have a privilege in a sense of like being able to express our emotions
to cry.
Outwardly.
Like I've heard that. It's okay to cry.
Yeah.
You
like
don't
we
say
can
that to
teach
boys.
them. Like I think it's our job a little bit to like help them and also like learn from them and like managing our emotions like a little bit better, which we're going to get into in a minute. Okay, so the next thing I want us to get into is the idea of women using men's vulnerability against them. Like they open up to you or they are soft or whatever, and then either in that moment or later down the line, you kind of use it against him. And I've definitely done this before. And this was something I heard a lot, like through, I think it was responses on the male loneliness episode, also just talking to men in my own life. Like this is one of like the biggest pain points that they say, like they get confused. So I want to give an example of this in this TikTok that we'll watch real quick.
This is why you should stop telling your girl your problems when you get into relationships.
How come you have not talked to me about any of your past trauma or anything you've gone through?
It's deep. Sit down. I see my homie die just right in front of me. It's like the worst trauma of my life.
You didn't take out the trash again. I'm so tired of this. You just make me angry.
Who the fuck
every
do you
day
think you're talking to?
Okay, every day.
Who do you think you're talking to?
Shut up. Shut up.
That's why I can't deal with you no more. That's why you're a hoe, bro.
Okay, that's why your homie's dead. That's why your homie's dead.
Hey, you did not just do that shit.
That's why your homie's dead.
You did not.
That's not funny. That's horrible.
It's a corny ass skit. Like I'm like, okay, the acting was not great in that.
But why is it low key accurate?
As fuck.
It's as fuck accurate. That's
like
crazy. That's why your homie's dead.
And it's so sad, like the words at the beginning where, or no, he said them. He was like, "This is why you shouldn't open up in a relationship." And like men, like when they say that, we get so annoyed, like da da da. You've been hurt once and you never open up again. But it's like, damn, like they really do go through this shit. And we asked the men in a poll, have you ever opened up to a woman only for her to use it against you later? 84% said yes. Only 16% said no. So like this is a thing.
Yeah. And that video got 60,000 likes, probably way more views. So it's like, and like the way he opened it is like so fucking like, it's so detrimental. Like this is why you should, like, dude, it's so bad. But I understand. And I feel like, again, it comes from like women being frustrated and wanting them to hurt the way that they hurt. But as simple as like your man's not like doing his chores around the house, like you don't need to bring up his trauma in order to like have a conversation about like why he should take out the trash.
Well, I think it's also like when we go back to like how men can seem cool as a cucumber, like completely unbothered. Like I think a lot of times I've been in these situations where like the man is not showing any sort of emotional distress about this thing I am very fucking distressed about right now. Thank you very much. And you're like mad, like you're so mad and he's not showing any emotion. So it's like you almost like pull up these things that you think are going to hurt him to get him to show emotion. Like I've definitely done that because you're like, oh, like you're hurting me so much and you're acting like it doesn't even mean shit. So I'm going to hurt you back. Like I have totally done that with men before. And it's fucked because he is hurting on the inside.
Yeah, like I think my ex-boyfriend, like he opened up to me about like what went wrong with like his past girlfriend. And like he was like being kind of healthy and being like, this is what I did wrong. Like, I know I did her wrong. Like, that wasn't right to do that to her. And then, like, when we would be big in fights, I was like, yeah, that's why, like, you know, that girl fucking hates you, like, and will never forgive you for what you did. And I'm never going to do it either. Like, I definitely would do shit like that. I'm like, that's why she got a man a week later because she, like, whatever. And it's just, like, using... And, like, I'm sure that wasn't easy for him to, like, acknowledge where he went wrong in his last relationship. Like, men don't like to acknowledge that shit. So, yeah. And I feel like it's just, like, it really just comes back to we just want to fucking hurt them and dig at them. But it's like, you know, are there situations where men will do that to women, too? Yeah.
100%.
Like, they will bring back something you said so long ago and hold it against you. So, it's not like we're saying, like, this is, you know, all women are wrong, but it's like when we're talking about men's feelings in the context of the patriarchy and vulnerability, it's like, you know, we do kind of need to self-reflect.
And I think we need to remember how sensitive and how, like, unskilled they are at dealing with their emotions. Because, like, I think, like, I know for me, like, I will get very annoyed about shit with my man or men I've been with in the past. And, like, I'll be pretty quick to get over it, like, depending on what it is. Like, I'll express it, and then, like, the second it's acknowledged or I feel like it's gone on too long, I'm like, okay, like, love you, like, let's move on. Like, men, like, I think because they aren't, like, equipped at talking it out as much or, like, working through it, like, that shit sits with them for longer and then reinforces their idea that they shouldn't share it. So it's like, we just got to think about the ways that it affects them versus us.
And then we're just going about our day thinking they're not thinking about it at all, though. And it's like, really, they are. So it's kind of, you know, it's just like communication is everything, y'all. You got to give your partner the space to open up and, like, talk about this shit. It's, like, pretty fucking scary, honestly. But this person submitted a story and said, my ex cheated with 4 guys in 2017 and I got upset. She gaslit my feelings, LMFAO, Zags ain't shit. And I'm just like, I feel like that type of story is not, like, shown as much, like, in the media or just, like, on TikTok. So it's like we kind of, like, don't think that shit happens.
That
but, like,
women cheat, Yeah,
but, like, women cheat a lot. Like, they do. You know what I mean? Like, I've definitely done cheat-like things before. I just feel like I mean, fucking 4 guys is a lot.
It's insane. Sure. I know. I liked how he said sags ain't shit instead of women ain't shit. Because, you know, like, we always, like, make fun of the guys that had their heart broken once, and now they're, like, don't trust women for life, which, like, I think us women do, too. But I think it's funny that he said she's a Sagittarius. She's not shit because of that versus that she's a woman.
Right.
But, yeah, that's fucked, you know? Like,
she gaslit my feelings. Like,
damn. Like, you should have a lot of feelings about that. But, yeah, we had another listener submit, my ex would get vulnerable with me. Then I learned if he started to cry in front of me, it's easier to manipulate me. So he would just start crying all the time till I learned his trick. This is interesting to me because I was with a partner that had really bad mental health issues, like real bad. Like I'm talking like needed intervention and refused to get it. And so I feel this because like I felt like there was a lot of times where I would try to hold space for his feelings, like try to talk it out, try to give him resources, tools and all of that, but he just wanted to wallow. And like I think he used it to manipulate me. So like that is real too, you know, like just because we say like, oh, men need to be vulnerable and we want them to be, and then like we shouldn't just be like they're not going to use it against you.
Right. Because it's like, you guys, like, it's like we have to remember, and whoever's listening has to remember, it's like, everything, when we talk about patriarchy, when we talk about gender constructs, it is all very generalized. Because obviously, every single person has a different experience. Every relationship has different dynamics. Like, you know, if someone's a predator, an abuser, it's like, yeah, we're not going to give them space to, well, whatever. It's like they need rehabilitation, like, whatever. So it's just like you have to like remember that. And that's why I think a lot of people get turned off to conversations like men versus women and like how it's different. And we all the time are also like struggle. Like we don't want to break up the polls by gender. We don't want to do this. But at the end of the day, it's like this is the world we were born into. And like in order to fix it and unlearn it, you do kind of need to talk about it like this while understanding that it's a blanket statement. Like not all, some men maybe grew up with, you know, 2 dads that never told them to man up. Like they lived in Alaska, not around a lot of other people. Like that is a different experience, like, you know, but it's like, we're talking just about, you know, the United States because of the patriarchy. This is the norm of what goes down. But I think it's so important to include stories like that, that kind of show you like, well, not in this situation.
Right, because emotional manipulation is still definitely a thing.
Yeah. This next listener shared a story and said, I don't want them to be a bitch, but deaf have emotions, cry, be sad. Just don't be a bitch. DG, any thoughts?
Whoa. I mean, it's like that catch-22 that I can understand why men are fucking confused because they're like, oh, you want us to open up, you want us to be vulnerable, and then we do, and then you don't respect my manhood. You don't respect that I'm still tough, And this is exactly that because we're like, oh, you can open up, you can cry, but just don't be a bitch. What does that mean?
Yeah, what does that
mean?
I know, because it's also like, you know, and we've all said shit like that. Like, I've definitely called men and be like, wow, you're a fucking pussy. Like, all that misogynistic shit, which is really like, you know, why is pussy an insult? Like, pussies are strong. They give birth. Like, you know, we all know that, but it's like we're like little parrots in society and you pick up little things and you start saying it. And just, like, don't be a bitch to say to a man, it's like, that's pretty hurtful because the last thing they want to be is a bitch, a.k.a. a woman.
Yep.
And why is that the last thing they want to be? And then the cycle just goes on from there. But, yeah, it's very confusing to say, have emotions, cry, be sad, but don't be a bitch. What does that actually mean? Can you use it in a different sentence and then you're going to see?
Like, don't be emotionally manipulative. Okay, that makes sense. Don't.
But is that what bitches do? Like,
I don't know. I'm just trying to think. Like, bitch is a broad statement, guys.
Right. But also, I get it. And this person that submitted is definitely younger than us as well. And it's like, back when I was her age, I probably would have said the same thing. So I'm not judging. But it's like, this is, you know, a very common experience that we do kind of need to get away from. And this last listener story before we move on is this person said, in my personal experience, I feel like men can very easily be vulnerable if they feel safe. I think the right thing for me, though, based off my personal experience, is men want to be vulnerable, but don't like to be held accountable in that vulnerability. Woo! And once you try to have them think about how they even ended up in this situation, that's when the narrative comes in, if that makes sense. As an adult, there's a certain point where the woe is me narrative has to stop, and you have to look at the things you are doing in the way you are moving that keeps landing you in the same fucked up positions over and over again. Who was that? Damn. Do you like it as much as me or not?
I half like it, I half don't. Because I feel like this to me is also giving the woman from the initial TikTok where she's like, but men don't realize that.
That's how they get me.
Like, 100%, I definitely agree. They can't be held accountable. I think men have a really hard time being held accountable in their like actions and all of that. And the woe is me narrative can definitely go too far. But I also feel like when she said, I think the thing for me though, based off personal experience, is men want to be vulnerable, but don't like to be held accountable, like in their vulnerability. Sometimes it's not time to hold them accountable. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes we just need to listen, and that's all we need to do. And I think sometimes we are so quick to be like, oh, well, you wouldn't be sad if you were doing this. Oh, you don't have this together. Da, da, da. But like, we don't need to fix right now. We just need to listen and like let them fix it on their own, because they should fix it on their own, you know? But like sometimes they just need an ear, and I don't think we always provide that.
Damn, bitch, you... That's so true. And I think like what we're getting at, and is like what we've said since the beginning, it's like the biggest problem might be like, why do we have such a quick defense? Like, why are we so triggered by male vulnerability? Because I think we kind of are.
Oh, we are.
Because it's not like, maybe it's like we don't have a lot of practice with it. We haven't had a lot of men in our lives be vulnerable with us. And it's like, honestly, my dad's cried in front of me many times. Like, he cries a lot.
My dad's cried in front of me, like, over stuff we were fighting about. And I remember being like,
same.
Dude, like, what the fuck? Because,
but like, I'd be, like, happy when he did.
I was, like, happy because I was like, at least you're getting it. But I was also just like, I feel like you've hurt me so much that now you want to like cry and be emotional, and it's a little bit too late or whatever. Like, now we're in a better place. But that's how I felt at the time. And I feel like a lot of that is also why a lot of women feel that way, is because we kind of know. So the pedagogy of the oppressed is like the oppressed knows their oppressor better than the oppressor knows themselves. Like, I think we see men like being, you know, psychological patriarchy, they can't express their emotions. We're watching them not express their emotions and then be frustrated and then explode. And we're like, well, I told you so. Like, this is like, we can see it. So we don't have as much empathy or sympathy for it when it manifests, because we're like, hello, duh, stop trying to be so tough. But like at the same time, we're reinforcing it, and it's how they're socialized. Like, you know what I'm saying? So it gets a little tricky.
Yeah.
But I do want to play this TikTok that kind of, to me, related to this, because there's a lot of like this men's self-help, like those like kind of workout video type of things where they kind of woe is me, but like they're men and they're tough. So let's play an example.
Okay.
You ever ask a man how he's doing and he says, I'm all right. I'm here to tell you, that man is not all right. That man is battling demons that you cannot even possibly imagine. That man is struggling every single day to find a reason to keep going. And the reason we say we're all right is because as a man, nobody really fucking cares what you're going through. So why even bother to say it? But you know what? I feel you, brother. Because I'm alright too.
Okay, the reason that I hate this type of content is because I feel like as women, we're looking at him like, no shit, you're not all right. We all know that you're not all right. And you think that it's this cult of brotherhood where you guys see each other and you're like, we're going through the struggle, man. But like, we as women see you're not okay. So why are you using these bullshit coping mechanisms? You know what I'm saying? Like,
was he being for real in that?
Yes, this type of content, when I worked for a gym before, guys, that was like an MMA boxing gym. And it was very like masculinity, the struggle, like working out, which we're going to get into a little bit later, like the types of activities men bond over. But like, this is like my like old boss loved this type of content because it's like, it's this inner pain that like men, like brotherhood, they like relate over and they're like, and no one understands.
You know what it reminds me of? Is how like white people, like we don't have culture. So we try to like appropriate other people's and like make shit up like Sweet Caroline, the song is like all our culture. And so maybe like men, like especially white men, like they try like because they just don't know what to do. Like in that they just don't know what to do. And it's this you can't like people are always like, well, why'd you bring race into the conversation? I'll tell you the fuck why. Because they're all like these all systems and these power dynamics. Like when I do think of white people and white supremacy, I do think of like white men in the patriarchy. Because it's the same sort of thing where it's like, you don't like white supremacy affects white people and makes them fucking assholes, like feeds that shit and makes them ignorant and like whatever. And it's like, you know, you think the patriarchy doesn't affect men that way, but it's the same shit. Like it makes them ignorant and even more. It's like, you know, socially how they're raised, but it's just it's
and
crazy,
that's the thing with this type of content. It is very predominantly like white men. Like there is like a sector that's like very like black men self-help, like this type of content too. But like it's almost like they're being oppressed by this patriarchy in a sense because they're not like no one gives a fuck if I'm not all right. We can't say it, brotherhood, whatever the fuck. But not realizing that this like manly patriarchy like shit that they're holding themselves to is what's oppressing them. Like,
I know.
Like they put it on women as like women don't understand. No one wants to hear that we're not okay, like whatever. And I think that's why women kind of look at men sometimes like, bro, like it's not that bad. Like you don't got to go lift 100 pounds and like sweat and cry inside before you just like tell me you had a bad day. Like,
right.
You know, it's not that deep, but I think it's just this weird, I don't know. This
the way that he was like, I feel you, brother. That's why I say brother sometimes like that. It's like making fun of that. Like the way he said it, like that was exactly how I've said it in the
It's like, I feel bad for these types of guys, but it's also just like, it's hard not to make fun of them.
And the music like, in the background, like it's a cancer story. I'm like, really, dude? Really?
Because men love to fight for something. Like they love to like be like Roman Empire vibes, which we're going to get into like a little bit later. But like, it's just like, dude, like you literally just had a bad day at work. Like
it's too much.
I don't know. Okay, so next I want to get into how women can and are kind of reinforcing this idea of patriarchy. And then we're going to talk about it, like the ways in which women do and if we are, etc. But first we're going to read a quote from Bell Hooks.
Yes. So Bell Hooks said, being vulnerable is an emotional state many men seek to avoid. Some men spend a lifetime in a state of avoidance and therefore never experience intimacy. Sadly, we have all colluded with the patriarchy by faking it with men, pretending levels of intimacy and closeness we do not feel. We tell men we love them when we feel we have absolutely no clue as to who they really are. We tell fathers we love them when we are terrified to share our perceptions of them. Our fear that if we disagree, we will be cast out, excommunicated. In this way, we all collude with patriarchal culture to make men feel they can have it all, that they can embrace patriarchal manhood and still hold their loved ones dear. In reality, the more patriarchal a man is, the more disconnected he must be from feeling. If he cannot feel, he cannot connect. If he cannot connect, he cannot be intimate. It's so good. Like, it's so good. I remember, like, reading that in a past episode, that last part specifically. I think we posted it on our Instagram as well. Because it's just so true. And I really related to, and I've also never thought about this sort of idea that like we do constantly tell men how much we love them. And sometimes we are kind of don't know who they really are and like terrified to learn about who they really are and terrified to be our true, you know, selves around them. Like I definitely feel that in my relationship with a man. It's like it was a lot of like, you know, giving them all this reassurance constantly of how much you love them. And you're almost trying to like reassure yourself that you do too, because you are so just like sometimes feeling so chaotic with like the patriarchy and like the man-woman hetero dynamic, you know?
Yeah, but do we really know them? And I think that's the thing is like if we're like kind of saying we do and we love them and all of these things, but like we're not giving them space to open up and be vulnerable and like all of that stuff.
It's like
we don't really know them.
Do we know them? Do we give them the space for us to get to know them? You know? And the answer is no.
Exactly.
Not everyone.
But most. So next I want to get into this Reddit post from r Ask Feminists. And this man asked, can women promote toxic masculinity? So he said, my mother is an quote unquote old school feminist and my father is an academic with socialist leanings. Most of the women I've dated would call themselves feminists too. Despite this, I feel I know little of the modern feminist movement and I am trying to learn more. I started reading about toxic masculinity recently, and it got me thinking. Most of the, quote, toxic masculinity I've been exposed to are from women. My parents and my male friends never really forced me to adopt traditional male interests like sports or cars or violent video games. But I have been told I was, quote, gay for trimming my nails by my first girlfriend. That I, quote, wasn't manly enough because I was a vegetarian by another woman I dated. And I was a, quote unquote, pussy for crying once. And I have had other similar things happen over the years. I feel that I've definitely learned to suppress my emotions. If I feel upset or depressed, I know there's no way I can tell my partner, despite her knowing about all the toxic masculinity. She was the catalyst for me reading about this stuff. At worst, I'd be made fun of or have what I'd said be used against me in a future argument. At best, it would just be awkward. Growing up, I was told it was fine to express emotion. But as an adult, I feel I've been, quote, trained by women to feel that that's not appealing or wanted. I'm in my 30s now and can definitely say that adopting a more traditional male traits like never talking about feelings has meant I've had way more stable relationships. Though it does suck sometimes, lesser of two evils. Do you think women can perpetuate toxic masculinity? And where does normal masculinity end and toxic masculinity start?
I have no fucking idea. That last question, I have no idea. But I think this is interesting. Like, it's like, again, coming back to like, it's like everyone grows up in different environments. Like this person didn't necessarily grew up feeling like he needed to shove his feelings down, but through relationships in his adult life, that's when he feel like it was more like apparent for him. And also it's like him trimming his nails thing is crazy. Like, what the fuck do you even mean? Don't you want his nails to be like, what?
So they don't cut like your pussy, like, hello.
Or just anything. Like, what the fuck? But I mean, can women promote toxic masculinity? Yes. I mean, I really think we do it like fucking constantly.
All the time.
I also think like this person had their own experience, but like even like the toxic boy moms on TikTok I've taught about, just like being like, you know, posing them with other little girls like they're going to be in a relationship one day. Like those are patriarchal things too. And I think it all just like bleeds into it. But I don't know. The question about normal masculinity and toxic masculinity like confuses me because I feel like part of this like gender non-binary, like gender is a social construct, like it gets me kind of scared to say things are feminine or things are masculine. And so I'm just like, do we still want normal masculinity too though, you know?
So I kind of like have something I was going to say later, but I'll bring it in now because I think it makes sense. So I was watching this YouTube video by Broe Deschanel. So she also has the podcast Rehash, which is really good. You guys should tune in. But she has this video about male weepies, a misunderstood genre. And so pretty much she was talking about these movies where it's like the Roman Empire types of movies, like Rocky, like things like that, like baseball movies.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of like men, quote unquote, yearning for a time when rugged masculinity was championed, and all these like war movies as well. And she also says as men's dissatisfaction with their social standing grows, so too does their resentment. So like this is kind of how we get the manosphere, because there's no real place in society, I think, right now to appreciate masculinity as much as we used to. Like, we're not in a time of war. I mean, we kind of are. But, like, it's not like World War I, World War II, like 9/11, like all those times where, like, men were going to war and fighting for our country, like that narrative where, like, women were like, wow, like they're really like putting their life on the line for us. Like, men kind of are longing for that time. And so they love these movies that like glorify war and all that stuff. And she also says these male weepy movies, which I usually write off as like, ew, like I don't want to watch Gladiator or like whatever the fuck. But they encourage men to cry about their stolen valor, which is like the criticism, because it's like, oh, like this is back when patriarchy, specifically white male patriarchy, was a thing. But she argues that beneath these hyper-masculine armor, these male weepy movies are less so toxic and more aspirational masculinity, because a lot of them are fighting to protect their families and their city and all of these things, which is what's like beautiful about men, is that they are physically stronger, like they can protect us, like whatever, and that they're also bonding over this common goal of like winning a sports championship or something, so they're able to be emotional. And then she pulls in this article from The Atlantic that talks about toxic masculinity versus heroic masculinity. And this idea really stuck with me, and I've been saying it all the time. Like, I actually watched this video when I was chilling with the man that I've been seeing, and I didn't like put it on intentionally. Like, this was before I even decided on this episode, but I think it influenced it a lot, because I was just like heroic masculinity is a thing. Like, it's when you think of like, oh, a man getting like a cat down from a fucking tree, like a man fixing your toilet, like all of those things are like heroic masculinity acts. But we live in such a society that like focuses on the toxic masculinity because of Me Too, like whatever, that like when we think masculinity, we instantly think toxic. So like what I've been trying to practice in my like relationship with this man is like highlighting the times where I think he's demonstrating heroic masculinity, because I think men need.
Has he saved from what tree?
Like, I don't know. Like, I'm trying to think of like a recent one that he did. Like, I don't know, but I'll be like, oh, that's because he watched the video with me. I'm like, oh, like that's heroic masculinity, because I think it is confusing for men, especially like this man in this Reddit story where it's like he grew up with a mom that's a feminist and he's reading about feminism and he's genuinely wants to know, but like, where does his masculinity sit in that? Because we talk about toxic masculinity so much. Where is the positive masculinity? And if we don't talk about that, we get people like Andrew Tate and we get all of that because
we've lost it completely. That's not in any conversation right now, ever. And the only place I can really think about it is like in TV shows. Like there's the show Never Have I Ever on Netflix. I love it. Shout out to all those people. But anyways, and like there's like this one scene where like the main character, like she's kind of getting torn down, like she fell into the pool, like she was having a fight, and he like runs in to get her out of the pool, even though like she's kind of like the quote unquote loser and he's popular. So it's like it was like heroic in a sense, and like that's where I kind of think about it. But I feel like we're just like so on this wave of like pushing men down and so focused on what they're not. Like we don't appreciate the good things about them. And even right now for me, I'm not going to lie, it's hard. Like I don't have like a man I'm into romantically, into sexually, into like I don't have a man friend. Like I'm like, if you ask me like what's a beautiful thing about a man, I wouldn't like come out with it right away. Like I would have to think, because I'm not like woohoo. Yeah. But if I was dating one, I feel like it would be easier. So
yeah. And I think it's interesting because it's like when we don't think of the traits about masculinity that are good, when we can't put our finger on what heroic masculinity is, like we're going to push men like this one into a box and be like, oh, you can't trim your fingernails. Oh, you can't open up about your feelings, when like really that is a beautiful thing. But like we're reinforcing patriarchy while not giving the space for the good things about masculinity. So it's confusing because to them, they're thinking, oh, if I put my feelings to the side, happy wife, happy life, I'm being a heroic man. But it's not. So like I think we just need to like reconsider like the parts of masculinity that are like helpful and keep society running and like are beautiful and all of those things that help us, while also considering like the ways that like men should be able to be feminine, just like we should be able to be masculine. Right. And all of that stuff, you know?
Because when you talk about femininity, you don't hear toxic femininity, which arguably they're kind of could
well,
be.
I did read like a couple articles. I think that would be an interesting topic for us to cover because that is like a thing that's emerging more now. But yeah, when you hear like it's not in the way that toxic masculinity has been shoved, which another thing, when I was researching this episode, a lot of the articles about men have feelings were from pre-Me Too. Like they were all like 2014, 2015, like 2016 before. And then I think Me Too happened and we kind of like stopped that part of feminism that was advocating for men as well because we saw so many men as predators. So I think we were there, but like, you know, we had to go forwards and backwards in ways.
Of course. And that's how any social movement always is. And I think it's hard to see the, you know, not to be corny, but like the duality in all of it. You know, it's like men aren't just predators, you know, just like some women that are abusers aren't just predators too. Like, this is hurting my brain a little bit. I'm not gonna lie.
I know it's different to think about, but I do think like as women, like think about what heroic masculinity is to you. Yeah. Think about what's toxic. Cause I think men hiding their vulnerabilities is toxic masculinity.
So, but heroic masculinity is like, for example, it's like your boyfriend, like, or not your boyfriend, but a boyfriend, or like watching something that might be harder to watch, like something about toxic masculinity or whatever. Like that could be heroic, like socially speaking.
Like, or something like if you're out with a man, like I'm thinking like Kanye, for example, with his girlfriend, which is a whole other mess, but like someone sexually harassed her recently in public and he got like arrested for like talking back to the guy. Like I think like if you're in public and a man tries to like do some weird shit to you and a man puts him in his place, that's heroic masculinity. He's protecting you. If you're walking on the sidewalk and a man has you on the inside and he's on the outside, that's heroic masculinity. If a man like fixes something for you, like those aspects of him using his body, like him using like his, you know, like those types of things.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to point them out because I think a lot of men are way more fucking insecure than we think. And as much as we want to think that men are trash, like they should be building houses, all these things don't affect them, I think it is. And the less that we like address it and acknowledge it, the more we're pushing them.
The farther we're going to be split.
Exactly, into incel territory, Andrew Tate bullshit. So,
bitch, you need to stop saying his name. We're going to have to bleep it out. I'm not fucking with it. Our videos are not going to get views.
I feel like we're deep enough into the episode where hopefully it doesn't matter. But, okay, so this is the part of the episode where I kind of want to get into some advice, like how we can improve intimate relationships between men and women. And Terrence Real's book, How Can I Get Through to You, is really, really good. I just read it. Bell Hooks quotes him a lot in her book as well. And there's this chapter towards the end that talks about like learning to listen and scanning for the positive when you come into disagreements with your partner. So we can read that.
Scanning for positive is a kind of unilateral disarmament. For men, it often feels like submission. One frequently hears that men are frightened of intimacy. I don't believe that's true. I don't think that many men know what intimacy is. One is either controlled or controlling, dominator or dominated. When men speak of fearing intimacy, what they really mean is that they fear subjugation. In a visceral way, most men in our culture experience vulnerability as opening themselves up to be overrun. Scanning for positive means that in a moment like that, when you feel someone's fangs on your neck, you bend further forward, exposing even more of your skin.
Leaning into vulnerability often works as a kind of jujitsu, effectively disarming your attacker. This goes against men's most fundamental training, as though by not, quote, standing up for themselves, they collude with their own castration. And here we have come to a crisis point in recovery for men that I treat. For if speaking requires the courage to assert, listening requires the courage to receive. And emotional receptivity is the antithesis to traditional masculinity.
I'm not going to lie. That was a lot of big words in there, babe.
It was. It definitely was. But
Can you break it down?
Yeah. Yeah. So pretty much what he's saying is that like being vulnerable and listening to your partner and scanning for the positives, which he tells people to do in these arguments, goes against men's like masculinity training, upbringing, how they're socialized. So like in their mind, you're either dominated or the dominator. You're either controlled or controlling. So like when they feel like a woman has like their hands around their neck, like open to their heart, like their vulnerability, they just want to like fight back and be like, don't castrate me, so to speak, you know? So it's really hard for them. But this is what he treats a lot of men for in his couples counseling. And he says that like, you need to listen. Men need to learn how to listen so that they can be receptive to women's emotions, because usually they just want to put it in a box and they want to fix it or they want to ignore it because it's scary to them. So it's not just on women, it's also on men to like be more vulnerable and unlearn these patriarchal like norms.
Right. And it's just kind of like, it's really breaking down even more that it's like this sort of like emotional reciprocation is completely like what traditional masculinity teaches these boys and men that they should
not
be.
To do.
And I think like women, it's just tough. It's like, it's honestly really sad, like the whole era of men is trash and all of that, because like, it's like in no conversations about men are trash are we talking about this shit. You know what I mean? And like, this is the real core. And it's like, I think it's hard because there are a lot of bad men out there. Yes. There are men that maybe like grew up in horrible situations and now they're awful to women. And it's like, are we supposed to feel bad for them? No.
Right.
But as a general speaking, like, you know, I do feel bad for men that like they have to sort of like unlearn this. And while they're unlearning it, they're getting like, you know, kind of like beaten down by women and like just telling them they're not good enough and blah, 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 blah. Because when we talk about, you know, women's issues, we always talk about how we're socialized as young girls and how we've experienced this forever. So why do we not do the same for men? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We have to hold the space for them. And obviously, like, you know, men still need to go to therapy. They still need to have their own ways to solve their problems, which is kind of what I want to get into next. So, like, I wanted to talk a little bit about like how to get your man to open up and like connecting in his language, because I think men cope like clearly differently than us women. Like we get over things faster based off of our research. Like we talk things out with our friends. In my experience, the men I know don't always talk about things with their friends or therapists. So we asked the men that follow us, when you're feeling down, how do you usually cope? And these results were surprising to me. Not that many men voted, though, so I do want to say that. But at 50%, what one is talking it out with a friend, lover, or therapist. 25% was working out, doing a hobby or work. And then the other 25% was smoking weed, drinking, or going out. And then 0% was self-help books, podcasts, and YouTube videos, which I thought was pretty interesting because all of the like Andrew Tate stuff is trending. I know you're going to get mad at me for saying it again, but like all of that is trending so much right now, which we talked about in our male loneliness episode, because there's no real space, I think, that talks about men's issues. And if men are seeking it.
Yeah, in a helpful way.
Right. In a way that's exactly, because I think like Andrew Tate is much more about like power, like getting money, like all of that stuff. So I don't know if men would even consider it like self-help. Like, I feel like a lot of men come across that content.
You know?
Yeah, like they come across that content, but I don't think as many men are seeking it out in the way women are socialized to seek out content to improve their relationships.
you know, literally.
Like that's not really like what's pushed on them. But I was like pleasantly surprised that they talk it out with a friend, lover, therapist, and like there was this
I think the polls were what's the word? Like it's not correct. Like this wasn't all men. But I mean, maybe it's true. I mean, I do think guys like talk to their friends. Like, and how are we ever really gonna know? Like, are they really gonna tell us that they just had a heart to heart with their best guy friend? No. Like, maybe they literally lock all the doors and do that shit. Like, we don't know.
Yeah. And maybe I do think that they do, like, in men that are in healthy relationships and like even men that like I wouldn't say like we're at that like super strong point yet. Like men do open up to their girlfriends or girls they're fucking with. Like I've had guys that I've just like fucked and they just decide to open up. Like being a stripper, you know, men just open up to you. Like, and I feel like that's why women get exhausted sometimes too, because we're like, okay, men love to open up with a woman and it can be like exhausting. So like part of that makes sense to me. And someone said diary, which isn't on here, which that's also a great way to cope.
I feel like that kind of falls under like
self-help
podcasts and stuff because it's like you're like it's journaling. Like that's like your classic like, you know, coping mechanism. Yeah. Exactly. Diary not on here. People are hilarious, bro.
I'm fucking dead. But next I want to get into like a little bit more advice. So this guy, Brian Knox, his like tagline is empowering women because there's nothing else I'd rather do. And he's like a relationship coach. He's the one that we pulled the like survey thing from before where it talks about the man being cool as a cucumber. But
do
really
we like him? Yeah.
Yeah, we fuck with him. Like he's cool. So you know, because some of this type of content, like the title of the article is men have a hard time opening up emotionally until you do this. Like it can be a little, but like I think his advice is good. And sometimes we read this as so fucking corny, but I think we need to listen to it. Okay.
All right. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah. And I just want to also say a lot of what I found, like based off of the male weepy stuff from Broe de Chanel is like men do bond over sports and activities and things like that. So that's
I know because you think it's like what you said before. It's like you think about, you know, the boys team, like they just won the baseball trophy. If any of them cried, no one would say shit.
Yeah, because they did a brotherly
it's like
journey
the one
together.
thing or like the Red Sox won the World Series and like guys are tearing up in the stands. Yep. They never thought they would see that. That's crazy. Okay, so we're going to read this. He says, use humor. I don't know if you've noticed, but when men bond together, they often use humor and banter. It can create a deep bond in friendship. So you teach him your language, like, for example, real empathy. And you try to use his language from time to time, which could be humor and banter. Not for every guy. There are very serious men out there that hate humor and smiling. Okay. But if you see him do it with his own friends, go for it. It will help him to open up. It will help him to feel safe. Another great way to create an emotional bond is to do something together that energizes him outside of the bedroom. Again, when do men bond? They throw a ball at each other or throw it at something like a hoop. They go fishing. They watch a game or a funny or scary movie together. They go on a road trip. These things are not about talking and bonding, but about doing. Nevertheless, they will talk a lot and will bond. Their connection will grow. It's easier for a man to open up then. I am stereotyping again, but a lot of women love to call a girlfriend and talk for an hour or go out to dinner or have a drink with a girlfriend so they can talk a lot, right? Absolutely. It's mostly about talking then. Most guys will not be found sitting at a table in a restaurant talking about their feelings for hours. No. They go hiking, skiing, they play pool or golf or throw a frisbee. They go do something and talk. It's about doing first. Try this and you'll be speaking his language. It'll be much easier to create that bond. Yeah, like I see what you mean by like the wording is a little bit like, okay, settle down.
Yeah.
However,
he's right.
You know, he's right. It's like the, you know, the part about doing things is like so vital. And it's not about, you know, tricking your man into being like, oh, let's go fucking fishing together and then you like talk his ear off the whole time.
Yeah.
Like it has to be like if you're craving this man to be emotional, you want the vulnerable side. It's like make him like, you know, feel comfortable to give you that realness, because like if you're just staring at each other like out to dinner, it's like it's different. Like maybe it's like, you know, that's okay for us to be able to do that for, you know, the men we care about.
Yeah, and I think it's important to like just understand where they're coming from, and like especially if you're gonna have a hard conversation or not even like, I think if you're frustrated with your man like not opening up, like I think it's really anxiety provoking for men to like sit down and have a conversation. Like he said, like it is stereotypical and we're leaning into gender norms, whatever. But
again,
I think it's
we kind of have to in the context of patriarchy because they're creating those quote unquote gender norms.
Exactly. Like we FaceTime our girls, we talk for hours, like or whatever. But like for guys, like they bond over these like activities because I think they're a little restless in a way. Like they feel uncomfortable with these emotions, but if they're moving their body, like they feel like it's okay. And I actually like, it's funny because recently it was like my man's like birthday and we like went out and we walked like literally guys, we walked like 9 fucking miles throughout the day. I was like dead by the end of the day. Like we stopped for drinks throughout. But I found like, it wasn't like I wanted to have a serious conversation or like anything crazy, but like through us just like walking and like being outside in the daytime, like he just started to open up about things that I've never heard him open up about before, like on his own, like unprovoked. But I think it's just like, it's different versus when we're laying in bed and I'm like, what do you think of this video essay? He's like, all right, shut the
yeah,
fuck up.
you.
Like, and he'll always be like, you just never stop talking. I'm like, babe, I'm a podcaster, okay?
Right.
But like, I get it. Like, it's different. Like, you know, like he wants to feel like he's accomplishing things.
You are honestly a whole meme. You should make a meme of like a bitch like looking at her man like this and it's like, so what'd you think of that video essay? But no, that's like, so true. Because it's like, and you know, you deserve to know what he thought of that video essay, but maybe it's like not at that time.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think we get frustrated because we want, like, we're like, oh, they're not paying attention. Oh, like, whatever. But it's just like, look, like, they can meet us halfway, but we can meet them halfway too, you know?
Or maybe 40%. We don't need to be 50-50.
Right.
We can still get a little extra.
Like, I'm not saying go fishing. I'm not going fishing fucking
anywhere.
anywhere.
But honestly, it's like, yeah, fishing, like playing pool, I could see conversations. If we're skiing together, I'm very much going to be focused on, like, not falling. We're not having,
maybe on
like...
the lift up there. But even walking, like, I know my parents go for walks all the time. Yeah, I've been skiing.
Yeah,
like,
I kind of sing quietly to focus myself down the mountain.
I'm
like a little bit like scared. It's kind of a lot to go up there. But yeah, you used to walk a lot with your ex too.
All my exes, I feel like the way that we bonded was really like walking and being outside. And that's just like an easy thing. Like, I'm not saying go have a fucking one-on-one basketball game with him, but like, you feel me?
Yeah.
But yeah, there's this other listener story. This girl said, I knew I really liked him when I didn't get the ick when he got vulnerable with me. Maybe the girls get the ick because they don't really like the guy they're with.
I agree.
And that's real, because if you really like this...
You go
ahead.
First.
No. Go ahead.
I was going to say, like, I kind of agree, like, but also I think the patriarchal cloud or the patriarchiness clouds us and we think that, like, it's because, it's just because I really, really like him. But it's like we should be able to give guys space to be vulnerable even if we aren't in love with them, too. Like, that's the, like, humanizing part of it all. Because it's like, again, you guys, like, I really was, like, the president of men are trash. Like, I'm not someone saying that, like, I've done no wrong. I've done a lot wrong, like, for sure. But it's just, like, you know, actually having the goal of like unlearning the patriarchy is a lot more empowering than feeling like men are so shitty. It sucks. I have to share the planet with them. Like they're everywhere. You can't get away from them. And even my mom, like she was never like, yes, I love how she hates men. Like she would always clock me and be like, you know, like this is not sustainable. Like you cannot, even if you're a lesbian, like you cannot live like that. It's not fun, and it's not fun to be angry. And even if the anger is valid, it's like working towards that goal of being like, you know what, like, I want to have vulnerable connections with men. I want to, if you really want your man to be vulnerable, you should be willing to like put in some effort and to understand that like maybe this is not the right time to have the conversation, but maybe this is, like, you know?
Yeah, and you're right. Like, you bring up a good point because I didn't even think about that. I was thinking about it more like, oh, maybe you don't really like them, because I think that's a thing. But also, you're right. Like, what if you have a son, like your brother, your guy friend?
You should
like,
be able to let, yeah.
You need to hold space for them. And again, we don't need to hold space for the guys that have done us super dirty. Like, still speak your mind against them and don't like be a fixer upper Bob the Builder for every guy you meet. But like, I think we can show a little bit more grace. Okay, the last section that I want to get into is just about how men and women can really like learn from each other, like the different ways that we're like socialized and affected by the patriarchy. And I want to bring us back to Terrence Real because he has a lot of really good information about just like how to communicate as a couple and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And this section is kind of like about boundaries and what women need to do and what men need to do. So let's read it. He says,
a poor internal boundary allows other people's feedback, beliefs about you, even at times their very emotional state, to pierce you to the quick. How could you think that of me? I'm so hurt that you feel that way. Or it depresses me when you get so sad. Are hallmark sentiments of someone with thin skin, a poor internal boundary. The complementary boundary dysfunction comes from skin that is too thick, permitting little to no receptivity. Walls protect you like a fortress. They let nothing in. The subjective experience is one of disconnection, obliviousness, or indifference. It doesn't take a lot of reflection to notice that this issue sorts by gender, with women needing to learn how to decrease their sensitivity to the environment and men needing to learn how to increase theirs. No, it's so true. It's like we have these polar opposite issues. And that's what I kind of like, we brought up before. It was like, sometimes as women, you feel like you don't want to cry. You do need to decrease that sensitivity because you don't want to fall into the stereotype. You want to, come off as strong. And in this society, when you cry, you're not strong, which is fucking stupid, but that's how it is. And then men, it's like this journey of needing to increase theirs. They're constantly being told to increase it.
Yeah.
But I feel like for men, it's like, do they ever have the feeling of like, oh, wow, like I really want to be more emotional?
Right.
Or is it just this constant echo of women in their life that are, either telling them not to be emotional or that they need to be a lot more emotional,
Yeah, and that's when it comes hard too, because I don't think men always listen to women when we're vulnerable. So it's kind of like they need to increase their sensitivity. They need to increase their empathy, which is a whole other conversation. Like, I think that would be like a whole different episode topic because that is a big thing. And I don't want to minimize that because like, I think a lot of the resentment that women hold and the reason that we don't want to be receptive to men is because they're not really ever as receptive to us because they don't know how to be. They just want to like solve the problem or like avoid it. But I think
that
like
classic like logic versus emotion shit.
Right. But I think like until we can show them what it feels like to really be listened to and be heard, like we almost kind of have to like lead by example. And then I think it becomes easier to be like, hey, I heard you out. Like, this is the time I need you to listen to me. Like those types of things, because like if they're not listening to them and then we're trying to give them the same treatment, we're not getting anywhere. So I do think we need to like manage our emotions and our sensitivities more. And again, take ourselves out of it and stop taking it so personally, because it's like, it's not like they're just choosing to not hear you or believe in your emotions or anything like that. Like they literally do not have the tools based off how they're socialized to like completely understand how they should act,
Right. And like even men that are bad people, it's like all men have a level of that, just like all women have, what we have. And it's like, part of being a woman, it's like hard to kind of maybe make that decision between like, is this man just an awful person or is he just a product of his socialization? And like, I want to like encourage him to fix that, you know? And I think we kind of just write it off as like, oh, he's a bad person right away, when like a lot of, you know, and it sucks that like, and this is like always a thing. It's like, as women, like, we do think about things in the context of other people's oppression, where it's like, I don't think men like jump to do that, especially not fucking white men.
Especially because they don't have any like point of reference. You know, like, even if you tell them that they're oppressed by patriarchy, they don't really get it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, even if you put the context of their pain into patriarchy and you're like, okay, you're oppressed by patriarchy too, like, they're probably going to fight you on it. So it's like they don't have a point of like reference. But yeah, I think, I don't know, like, I think as women, like, it's exhausting to be a woman, to like hear men vent to you, and like to have to like talk to your girlfriends because your man doesn't listen to your problems, and like all of that is so exhausting. But at the same time, like, I do think that like we are blessed and like maybe a little privileged in the fact that like at least society does hold space for us to cry and like have emotions, and like let's use that to at the very least build better connections with men and show them how it's done. Because if we're gonna have heterosexual relationships or sons or dads or brothers or whatever, like, we need to like do this stuff.
I know, we really do. And it's like, that's where the like hetero pessimism like comes in huge, because it's like, you know, if someone's queer, it's like they don't really have that need to like go through this, but it still is important for everyone. But, and then this listener also submitted a story. They said, men and boys are socialized to show few emotions. The rigid boxes men put women in are the same boxes they put themselves in. Misogyny hurts men by using the same weapons it hurts women, and we all need therapy.
Period.
It's so true. And it's like, not only is it better to talk about patriarchy in context of like how it hurts everyone, but it's like, it's really the only way to like enact actual change, because otherwise it's like you're just seeing one side of it, you know? And it's like if the goal is to end oppression for women, it's like you can't think about that without like kind of, you know, centering men in that conversation as well. And again, it's like we've just been so ingrained to de-center men because patriarchy centers them. They're centered in the whole world. So it's like we just like push away from them, like completely reject that. But it's like it's gone too far. And that's what you said right at the beginning. It's like it's okay to not, we don't want men to be the center of everything, you know? But it's like we can't push them off the fucking cliff completely. Like, and again, guys, I've literally said things like, we don't need men in society. Like, we can just, you know, have all their sperm come out, freeze it, kill every single one of them, and just have like millions of fridges of all their sperm, but like those fathers are dead. And that's horrifying. I should be horrified that I said that. And I am, but I also like, I'm not alone. Like, this has been a thing, you know, and we're all kind of on fire with it. But I think, you know, especially as a white woman, it's like I do need to calm the fuck down sometimes. But at the same time, had I have got to that conclusion if I didn't go so far over the edge, I don't know. Like, you kind of got to go through the motions. Like, this shit's not easy.
And it's ultimately good for us too. Like, especially like we're always going to have relationships with men. Like, we're not moving to an island without men anywhere. And if you're heterosexual, like, we have to do this. And it's good for us too, because I think like, unfortunately, like, do we have to do some work to teach them empathy and to maybe like give a little more than they do? And is that frustrating as fuck? Yes. But like, I think ultimately it's going to be better for like the next generation and like so on, like as we've, you know, accomplished things in other areas, like it's better for us now than it was for our moms and everything like that. So it's like, you know, like, we got to think about it as it's not just about like men and we're men apologists and we're centering them and their issues and putting them before ourselves. But like, you also got to think about how this is going to like relieve a lot of stress for you and like deepen your connection.
Us too.
Yeah.
It's not just about them. It's like, do you really want to go on like this? Like, this so like polarized situation, and like how, you know, historically it's been like all wives are completely unfulfilled by their husbands because they don't let them in emotionally. They don't have the first person experience of being a woman or being a bi woman if you're with a straight man. It's like, we don't want to go on like this. We don't. And if you're a straight woman that hates men so much, it's like you do need to wake up a little bit because, you know, do you just never want to be in a relationship? Like, it's not helpful. It's really not. And again, I've done it. Like, we've done it. We've both done it. Like,
So yeah, let's kind of wrap it up and get into how we end every episode, but we're wet, dry, and still a little bit confused about the topic. So I guess I'll go first. Like, I'm definitely wet that, like, we've both, like, kind of come to this, like, realization. I think I was a little before Autumn, but, like...
Oh, for sure. She really was. She was... Does it make sense if I say you were the catalyst for me?
Oh, that makes me feel
Does that
so
make
great.
sense, though? Yeah. Like, catalyst is
I
like
think
an
it was the
agent of
podcast. I think it was the podcast, though, really, because I think, like, without, like, us doing the research, and you planned the male loneliness episode, so I think it was, like, on your own, too, like, as you were researching it, but, like, I really am proud of us and how far we've come, because I think we've both been hurt by men in a lot of ways, like, not just partners, but, like, fathers, like, brothers, just men in general at work.
Strip club clients.
Exactly, like, men have hurt us, and I think it takes, like, a lot of courage to be like, you know, not all men are like this, and kind of go against the predominant female voice that's... I don't want to say female because men use that in a derogatory sense, but, like, I think it's hard to go against the predominant, like, woman, girl voice on TikTok and a lot of podcasts that I listen to that's, like, very, like, fuck men, because it's, like, it just doesn't feel good, and I'm sick of it, and, like, I get scared that our women listeners are going to be like, what the fuck, you guys are centering men too much, but, like, I'm wet that we have, like, the quote-unquote courage to do this, like, not to, like, pat ourselves on our back, but, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think it's taken a journey for us not to be afraid of what people are going to say back to us, so I'm wet about that.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'm wet about, honestly, is heroic masculinity. Like, I do think that video from Roy Deschanel was, like, really eye-opening, and it comes from an article from The Atlantic. But, like, I've struggled, like, in my, like, intimate relationship with this man that I'm, like, with right now, like, to kind of, like, address these issues of gender, because he knows that I talk about a lot of this stuff on the podcast, and I think it's, like, men's instinct to think that I'm, like, of the voice that's, like, men are trash, da-da-da-da-da. And I think that I've learned throughout being with him the ways that I can talk about it, and I think I saw it initially as a threat and as, like, fucked up, but I'm realizing more that, like, he does want to meet me in the middle, but, like, I need to give a little bit too. And so I found, like, ways to, like, you know, be grateful for his masculinity and be grateful for masculinity, like, outside of, like, men are trash, toxic masculinity, all of that. So, like, I like that that's coming into, like, more of our language, and we're able to, like, see that more, you know?
Yeah, I echo all of that. Like, I'm really wet about the duality for everything, because even just, like, on my own journey, it's like a big takeaway for me. It's like, it's okay to, like, have these horrible interactions with men. It's okay to have times in your life where you felt like you really hated them and didn't want to be around men, didn't feel safe around men. It's okay to also have all of that and also understand that, like, and, like, have this knowing that, like, decentering men completely is not going to make anything better. It's not going to make you happy. It's not going to have, you know, you're going to be kind of living in fear of them and living in hatred. So it's like, it's not about me being like, yes, like, all men, I feel bad for them, like, they're great guys deep down. Like, it's more about yourself as women coming to that understanding where it's like, you know, I want my life to be happy. I want my relationship to be good. So I'm hurting myself by doing this, and I'm hurting, you know, everything. And I think what really helped me too is listening to women talking about it, because, like, you hear men talk about it, like, no one gives a fuck about how we feel, and it's kind of like what? Because you just don't know who it is, where it's coming from, if it's genuine. But it's like, I think it was Shoe on Head's videos of male loneliness, and again, Khadijah. It's like creators that are, you know, people that are wanting to empower women actively, but at the same time, like, this, you know, having these hard conversations where it is hard to kind of center men on the internet today. And it's not even the right word that we're centering them. It's just, like, kind of taking them a little bit more.
It's honestly just including them, like, in their feelings and their voices in the, like, conversation, which is crazy. But yeah, I would say like I'm so dry about like similar, like in that context, like how we've made so much progress as women that it's like we're kind of like defensive and afraid to like address these men's issues without it feeling like an attack on all the like the strengths or lengths that we've like made, you know, like it feels like we're going backwards, but I think like we need to remove that defensiveness. And I'm also dry about like how it's so much easier to talk about it in this sense when we're having a podcast and we have all this research versus actually doing it in real life. Like, you know, like it's our impulse. It's how society like has brought us up. It's like what's ingrained in us. So I think like I'm dry about kind of the work that we need to do in that to unlearn this all the time. And I'm dry that I feel like it's going to be a long time before women as a collective kind of like unlearn this stuff. And men too. Like I'm dry about the men that bottle up their, because they contribute to it. The men that don't go to therapy, the men that don't seek self-help. Like it shouldn't all be on women. So both sides of that to me are really dry.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm so dry, like definitely that I've been kind of like I haven't really been aware as much of how much a role women play in enabling toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
Like we always talk about it in the context of like men kind of enabling themselves to be toxic and masculine, which is true. Toxic masculinity, not toxic and masculine.
Yeah.
But how much of women play in that role as well? Like I'm dry about, you know, learning that it's not a great feeling, but it's like I've played a role in it for sure. Like we all have. And I'm just, you know, dry about that in general and, you know, doing the work like in your real life, like you said, like it is really hard. Like I'm dry about how confusing it all is because it's like at the end of the day, there are a lot of people that are really bad out there and are abusers. So it's like we, you know, but the men that we should really be centering are the ones that aren't abusers and that like do want to get better or at least are like trying in some capacity. But it's like, you know, we write them off too. Like we write everyone off. And so it's just hard. It really is.
Yeah, I would say like I'm confused about like exactly what you said, like especially with like the abusers and stuff, because I think like I don't know, like when I was in my abusive relationship, like I think I was like consuming a lot of like self-help, like relationship content, podcasts, like all of that. And I think like sometimes as women, especially if you're a woman listening that is in like a toxic relationship, it can become easy to put it on yourself and be like, oh, like I need to be doing more of this. I need to be doing more of this. And like forget men's role and unlearning their own shit. And so that's where it becomes a little bit iffy because I think women have the right to have like anger about this stuff and frustration and resentment, and a lot of it does fall on men. So I'm a little bit confused about like where the line in all of that is, because it's easy to say like in a healthy relationship this is what it should be like, but what is a healthy relationship and which men should we be listening? Like all of that is a little confusing.
Yeah, it's like where do you draw the line between like kind of acknowledging that this person's past experiences of like being a man in this world, but then also it's like, but they're not doing anything about it either.
Yeah.
But maybe they didn't have the tools to do anything about it. They didn't even really know what exactly they needed to do or where this was all coming from. So it's like, where do we draw the line as women, especially in romantic relationships with men, to like give them not a pass, but like more of a level of understanding and at least acknowledge it within that discourse instead of just kind of not thinking about it at all.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you know, it's like everyone makes the argument. It's like you are responsible for not unlearning things that you were brought up in the world. Like that's your responsibility.
But exactly. But like, where's the line go? Because I think like with my ex, I gave him too much. Like it was so clear to me how society had completely fucked him as a man, let alone a black man. And it was like, I felt like so like responsible. Like there was more that I should do as a woman to like, and a white woman to create help this space and help. But like, there is a line where it becomes too much. So like, I don't know, like that'd be an interesting episode and like stuff to talk about in the future, because like, especially when you're in that world, like where can we like let society and like everything that's impacted us like inform the decisions we make, but when do we draw the line, like our personal boundaries, and be like, oh, that's on them regardless?
Because especially when we're having emotional reactions with our partners, we're not thinking about all of this, you know? And it's like, that's that self-reflection to being like, you know, to just like think more before you speak and like really just try to calm down before you have intense conversations too, because emotions do cloud everything and all this shit just goes out the fucking window because you're just like, I love this person, I want to make it work, whatever. So it is confusing. It's really confusing. And again, just emphasis on, you know, the courage to talk about it and bring it up is where we should all be focusing. But yeah, I mean, that about does it for this episode, guys. Please let us know what you think, like, especially of what we just said about where do you kind of, you know, draw the line. Like, do you think you as a woman have enabled toxic masculinity? Was that a hard thing for you to come to? Like, do you feel like you're really ready to like let men be vulnerable with you? Like, did you guys learn anything? Do you want to echo anything? Let us know in the comments below. Or you can always email us, sowetsodry@gmail.com. The O's are zeros with any thoughts or like topics or anything. As we said in the beginning, we post polls on Instagram. So please follow us on Instagram as well @sowetsodry. And wherever you guys are listening, just make sure you do follow or subscribe to us. Leave a like and comment below. You know, it would mean so much to us.
Yes, and we also do have listener support. It's the only way that you guys can donate to us financially right now. It's 99 cents, $4.99, or $9.99 a month. Think of it as a subscription. It is at the bottom. It is at the bottom in the description of every single episode. And yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. We love you, and we will catch you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.
Exactly.